all, welcome to Narayana IAS. This is Sureka Bhaskar presenting to you the daily news analysis. In today's discussion, we've picked up a number of topics from The Hindu and the Indian Express which are important and relevant for your UPSC CSE examination. Now let us have a look at the topics. The first topic that we'll be discussing is taken from The Hindu, page number 10, average annual sitting days in the Lok Sabha down to 55. This is nothing but talks about a recent study conducted by the PRS Legislative Research that has actually found a decrease of around 59% of the average annual sitting when compared to that of the first Lok Sabha to that of the current 17th Lok Sabha. We'll also discuss about how this will have implications on the parliamentary processes as well as the productivity of the parliament, particularly the Lok Sabha. Moving forward, we have again picked up another article from The Hindu, that is, the patterns of global warming are more important than its level. So this discusses about how important it is to understand the patterns of global warming rather than strictly adhering to the thresholds like 1.5 degrees pre-industrial levels or 2 degrees according to the Paris Convention. Moving forward, we'll discuss about over 3 lakh ASHAs apply for center's health cover. This is nothing but it discusses about the center's announcement of extending the benefits of the Ayushman Bharat scheme, that is a centrally sponsored scheme, to the ASHA as well as the Anganwadi workers. We'll be discussing about the provisions of the scheme as well as the differences between the ASHA workers, their primary role, as well as the Anganwadi workers. The next article has been taken up from page number 10, The Indian Express, that is, Trump says want NATO allies pay up or will tell Russia to do whatever it wants. So this particularly talks about the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, who actually requested or stated all the allies of the North Atlantic Treaty Organizations, that is the NATO, to keep with their defense expenditure levels as a part of the collective security principle of the Washington Treaty, according to which the NATO was actually formed. Then moving forward, BJP releases first list of RS nominees. This is a political, in nature news. But here, what is the takeaway will be, we'll be discussing about what is Rajya Sabha, its constituents, then the composition as well as the method of election that actually takes place there. That is indirect election by means of single transferable vote will be discussed here with proper illustration. And finally, we'll be ending the discussion by solving few preliminary as well as mains practice questions that are relevant and which are in parallel and sync with the above topics. The first article for the day will be average annual sitting days in the Lok Sabha down to 55. So this particular article discusses about the recent study of the PRS Legislative Research, which is nothing but an extensive study of the annual sitting days of the Lok Sabha, starting from the first Lok Sabha that was constituted in 1952 to the current 17th Lok Sabha that was constituted in 2019. So it has found out that the number of the annual sitting or the average number of days of annual sitting has drastically decreased to around 59.3%. Okay. So here we'll be discussing about declining parliamentary productivity and also democratic accountability. If you see it with respect to that of the UPSC syllabus, you can map it under GS paper 2, Parliament as well as Indian Constitution. So moving forward, Parliament has been an important topic as well as a favorite topic for the UPSC. So you have a number of questions in 2018, 2021 in both prelims and mains. Here, if you see the mains question, they had spoken about, in your view, how the Parliament is able to ensure the accountability of the executive in India. And the second one speaks about how useful are the parliamentary committees in implementing or executing the public policy. So moving forward, let us actually understand what the news is about. Okay. So according to a study by the PRS Legislative Research, from the first Lok Sabha to the 17th, the average annual sitting days has decreased approximately by 59.3%. That is almost 60%. Okay. So here we need to know that the first Lok Sabha, when was it constituted? See, after independence in 1947, what has happened was the general election actually took place between 1951 October to around Feb 1952. Okay. So the first Lok Sabha was actually constituted in the year 1952, and after the general elections, the INC, that is the Indian National Congress, had won a swooping majority and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was the first Prime Minister of India. Whereas the 17th, Lok Sabha, here it was actually constituted after the general elections in 2019, where BJP, that is the current ruling party, had won the majority. And now what happens is Mr. Narendra Modi is the Prime Minister of India. Now it has been observed that the average number of days that the Lok Sabha had actually met has drastically decreased to around 60%. Okay. So before going into the key findings or the observations of the study, it is important to understand the difference between the lower house as well as the upper house on basis of different parameters like how the members are elected, what is the composition, the constitution, the powers, the representation of UTs, the method of elections, etc. Okay, so let us actually quickly go through that. That is the difference between the Lok Sabha as well as the Rajya Sabha. Okay, so first one, the Lok Sabha is called as the lower house, or it is also called as the house of the people, as it actually represents, okay, the people of India as a whole. Whereas if you see the Rajya Sabha, it is called as the upper house, and that is why it is nothing but it is a council of states as it is a representation of the states as well as the UTs of the country. If you see the composition of the Lok Sabha, the maximum strength is actually 550, where 530 are actually from the states and 20 are from the UTs, okay? And the current strength is actually 543. If you see that of the Rajya Sabha, the actual or the total strength of the members is actually 250, where 238 are from the states and the UTs, and the remaining 12 are to be nominated by the president from, they are people who have expertise or who have actually achieved in the areas of literature, art, science, etc. And now moving ahead, what happens? The election of the members, the Lok Sabha members are elected or voted upon directly by the people. So you have direct election here. And here you have the elected representatives of the people. They go on to actually choose the members of the Rajya Sabha indirectly. So here you have indirect election. And here if you see the representation of the UTs, it has 13 members who are representatives of the different union territories across the country. Whereas if you see in Rajya Sabha, it has representation from the UTs such as Delhi, Puducherry as well as Jammu and Kashmir, where they have a significant number of population. Moving ahead, if you see nominated members, post that 95th Constitutional Amendment Act, what happened? There had to be 2 nominated Anglo-Indian members in the Lok Sabha up to 2020, okay? But after that, after the 104th Constitutional Amendment Act, this nomination of Anglo-Indian members was actually scrapped. Whereas if you see the nominated members here, I told you there are actually 12 nominated members who have achieved in different areas of art, science, etc. Moving on, the functions is, here it actually selects the executive, that is the government, and it initiates and makes laws, okay? Whereas if you see, here I told you it controls basically the council of ministers and keeps them accountable. Whereas if you see the functions of the Rajya Sabha, it reviews and alters the laws that are actually made by the Lok Sabha. But then again, in case of money bills, etc., the Lok Sabha actually has a call, okay? So here the Rajya Sabha actually decides, it's not binding on the Lok Sabha. Next, if you see, the term is that of Lok Sabha, it is 5 years, or it can also undergo any kind of dissolution if the majority or if the ruling party cannot prove its confidence by majority, okay? Here, this Rajya Sabha is permanent. There is no premature dissolution, and members actually serve a staggered 6-year term with 1/3 of the members retiring every 2 years, okay? So this actually participates in the joint sittings, but due to the fewer representation, the voice is actually not as that much. That is, you can say that it is not as powerful as that of the Lok Sabha. Now let us understand the key findings of the study related to the 17th Lok Sabha, okay? So if you actually see here in this infographic, they have actually compared the annual number of, sitting, that is 135 days it has been of the first Lok Sabha. Whereas if you compare to the 17th, it has been just 55 days. That is marked a significant reduction to around 59.3%, okay? So, moving forward, there have been quick bill passages, okay? That is 58% of the bills were actually passed within 2 weeks of its introduction, okay, without proper discussion or debates around the same. Here, the examples include J&K Reorganization Bill of 2019. Then we have the recent Women Reservation Bill of 2023, okay? And also, it is seen that 35% of the bills were actually passed in less than an hour of discussion in the Lok Sabha. And the significant, this was 35% in the Lok Sabha. And if you compare it with the figure of the Rajya Sabha, it was 34%. So moving forward, if you look at the committee referrals, here the 16 actually refers to only 16% of the bills were referred to the committee for scrutiny. That is, we have parliamentary committees which are constituted with the subject matter experts who will actually scrutinize the provisions of the bill, whether it is for larger public good or not. Okay, but here it is found that in the 17th Lok Sabha sitting, only 16% of the bills had actually sent for the referrals. If you see this chart, you can actually understand only 16% of it. Moving forward, you can see the budget discussion. On an average, 80% of the budget was actually voted down without proper discussion as well as debate. Now let us look at the primary reasons for the declining productivity of the parliament. Okay, first one is frequent disruptions. I would like to write it here itself. So this is the frequent disruptions. What happens is there have been a number of political protests. There are a lot of sloganeering and lot of contention between the opposition as well as the ruling party, especially if we take the bills like the Citizenship Amendment Act as well as the farm laws. These have all significantly reduced the effective legislative time. Okay, there has been a growing divide between the ruling party as well as the opposition party. So this has actually led to a major breakdown in the communication as well as consensus. So this has resulted in legislative deadlock as well as a decreased productivity. Moving on, we have underutilization of the parliamentary committees. I told you, right? These parliamentary committees have subject matter experts and they will scrutinize the different provisions of the bill for the larger good as well as the welfare of the society. But important bills of late have been passed without being referred to this committee, thereby bypassing the essential step in order to, ensure comprehensive legislation. So here what happens is comprehensive legislation is missing. Moving forward is lack of diversity. If you see, there is a lack of diversity of the Indian Parliament. That is, you have underrepresentation of women. We have underrepresentation of minorities as well as the marginalized section of population. So, what happens is this leads to a narrowed representation as well as responsiveness as well as perspectives that are given. So perspectives in absence of these minorities or because of lack of diversity is actually inclined only to one kind of a group, which is a majority group, and this diminishes the legislative quality as well as inclusivity, and this contributes to the decline in parliamentary productivity. Moving on, we have absence of fixed parliamentary schedule. If you see in developed countries like the UK as well as US, they have a fixed parliamentary schedule. That is, it has to take place at this time and for a particular length of time. So such a calendar is not, that is fixed sitting hours is actually not there in India, or a consistent legislative calendar is not present. Thereby, due to the unpredictability as well as shortened sessions, what happens? The parliamentary productivity as well as the bills are not being properly discussed or debated. The sixth point is inadequate action against disruptions. As we saw, there are a lot of political protests, there are a lot of sloganeering as well as contentions as it was seen here. But as a counter to this, there has been a failure to promptly discipline the members who are disrupting the proceedings of the House. So moving forward, the last one is impact of COVID-19 pandemic. This is nothing but the pandemic had actually led to curtailment of sessions. So there was absence of physical sittings or the meetings of the House. So these are all the reasons for the decreasing productivity of the parliament. Now we'll discuss about the implications of the declining productivity. Okay. So the first one, it will always lead to reduced accountability. That is here, checks and balances is being compromised. Okay, that is the ruling party which has to be answerable or accountable to the legislature. It is actually not being followed. Here, hasty legislations are actually there. As we saw, a number of bills are actually being passed, and most of the budget, that is 80%, is voted upon without discussion and proper debate. The next one is Ordinance Raj. What happens is the reduced functioning, it prompts the reliance on a number of ordinances that will be passed for legislative action. So this will again undermine the legislative process and the principle of separation of powers. The next one, there will be a lot of financial inefficiency. How is this actually relevant here is that there is a high cost for running of the parliamentary sessions. So if there are shorter sessions, or if it is not productive, which is actually a major pillar of a parliamentary democracy's functioning, what happens, it is actually seen as a poor return on the public investment. Okay. The next one is diminished public trust. So the apparent failures will actually lead to the diminishing public trust in democratic institutions. So what are the possible way forward? One of the major thing is setting up of an annual calendar of sitting, as we actually see in parliamentary sessions of the UK as well as US, in order to ensure the predictable as well as sufficient sitting days, predictable days. The next one is increase the number of sitting days, that is extend the number of sitting days in order to prevent the lapsing of important bills. And this will also allow comprehensive discussions that can be taken up. The next one is to provide proper training for members, and then there has to be proper pre-legislative scrutiny. That is, we need to introduce these legislative bills for public comment, as well as allocate specific days for opposition-led discussions and debates over a particular bill without hasty passage. Next one is virtual meetings. As we saw that, during COVID, this has actually restricted the number of physical meetings. So here we need to leverage technology to allow for virtual parliamentary meetings. So the next article that we'll be discussing about is the patterns of global warming are more important than its levels. Okay. So as we know, there are number of reports that actually state that 2023 have been the warmest year and have been a year which was subjected to a lot of climatic catastrophes. It is important to understand the patterns of global warming rather than merely adhering to the conventional targets or the thresholds like 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial levels that has been concluded at the Paris Agreement. Okay, so here we will actually be discussing about the global warming that has been taking place and the climate change, and it actually becomes an important topic of discussion under mains GS paper 3, environmental pollution and degradation. Since global warming as well as climate change are important topics for the examination, there have been questions in the mains as well as the prelims examination. Here, if we see the previous year question in 2022, it talks about the global warming as well as its effects on the global climate. And next in 2019, there has been a question on impact of global warming on the coral life system with examples. So moving ahead, let us actually look into the news. The record-breaking warming levels as well as the climate disasters of 2023 highlights that it is important to understand the global warming patterns rather than strictly adhering to the thresholds like 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming limit. So we'll be understanding what is this 1.5 degrees Celsius and under what pretext that this particular threshold was decided. According to the World Meteorological Organization, 2023 has been the warmest year on the record. And also, this has been a year of major climatic catastrophes across the globe, such as we had the Hawaii wildfires, the Libya floods, the European heat waves, etc. Moving forward, now let us understand what is this 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming limit. Okay. So this has been a threshold that was established under United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the aim of this particular threshold was to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels. What was the purpose of this? Was to prevent most of the catastrophic effects of climate change. So now let us understand what are all the fundamental problems with this particular 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming limit. So moving forward, looking at this infographic, we actually understand that it is politically determined and not purely scientific. Next one is oversimplification of climate dynamics, equity and implementation challenges, and finally scientific and measurement challenges. Now let us actually look into each point one by one in detail. So, this particular target or the threshold of 1.5 degrees was politically determined. Okay, so here all the countries had actually come together and it was actually deduced by means of a political negotiation rather than conducting a comprehensive scientific evaluation of how much each fraction of warming will actually contribute to global warming and what will be the impact on a larger scale. Rather than taking a comprehensive scientific analysis, it was actually concluded by merely political negotiations. Okay, so this can actually obscure the complex, uneven nature of climate impacts across different regions of the world. So, since this is politically determined and not purely scientific, this is actually causing a huge problem. Next one is oversimplification of climate dynamics. So, what do you mean by this is that by concluding a singular global point, what happens? The diverse and the uneven nature of distribution of the global warming patterns as well as the climatic changes are not observed across the globe and they are overlooked. Okay, so this kind of simplification, that is, you actually bring a global focal point of 1.5 degree threshold, this will fail to capture the detailed impacts on regional climates. It will overlook how the ecosystems of the particular place is affected, as well as how the communities are actually affected by the impacts of the local vagaries of nature. Moving forward, equity and implementation challenges. See, this global threshold of 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees Celsius, this does not fully address the disparity of the emissions that has been caused earlier by the developed nations. So ultimately what happens, it comes down to the developing nations actually bearing the brunt of it. Okay, so what happens is the developing nations are disproportionately affected, thereby adapting and mitigating the climate change within this framework actually becomes a difficulty for the developing nations. The last point is scientific and measurement challenges. Okay, so there are a lot of measurement challenges, that is measuring accurately and precisely this 1.5 degrees Celsius of climate change is actually very, very difficult, because it is actually very difficult to pinpoint when that 1.5 degree limit is actually reached. Okay, so these are the fundamental problems with establishing a global threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius. Okay, so moving forward, now let us understand if we have crossed this particular limit. So current instrumental data have suggested that we are nearing this particular limit, but we have not conclusively surpassed this 1.5 degree mark globally. However, if you take, the regional analysis, like for example, including the paleoclimatic studies indicate that certain areas have already experienced the warming beyond this particular threshold. This actually shows the complex, non-uniform nature of global warming across the globe. Now, as I mentioned, there is something called as these paleoclimatic studies. It is important to understand what is paleoclimatology. Okay, so paleoclimatology is nothing but it is the study of Earth's climate during its entire history, and it uses something called as climate proxies, or in other words, these are nothing but the imprints that are left by past climates to interpret the paleoclimate of the Earth. So there are different methods, that is, I will tell you few of the climate proxies. So as I told you, paleoclimatology is the study of Earth's climate during the entire history of the Earth. It uses climate proxies or imprints left by the past climates to interpret the paleoclimate. So these climate proxies include, first one is the rings on the trees, and this is also called as dendrochronology, where tree rings actually show the climate variations through the width as well as the density. If you see, the wider rings actually show that the region or the climate was warmer and wetter. Whereas if you see narrower rings, it actually shows the particular climate had been colder and drier. So this actually provides how the climate records have been over the previous years. The next one is different kind of organisms like the coral reefs and all those things. All these actually reflect the past climate, such as depending on what has been the temperature of the water, what have been the changes, in the oceans, etc. Moving on, we have, sediments and rocks also in the earth. They actually, depict the climate of the earth based on the stratification or the layers. Then the next one is the ice sheets and the cores. If you see the ice sheets which are actually found in areas of Greenland and Antarctica, they actually trap the atmospheric air in the form of bubbles. And this actually gives snapshot of the past climatic compositions and temperatures by isotopic analysis. Okay. So moving ahead, let us understand what are the global warming patterns. So global warming patterns, they essentially describe the uneven distribution of temperature, and this increase across the different regions of the world. And these patterns are influenced by a variety of factors. This can be either your geography or ocean currents, atmospheric conditions, as well as human-induced emissions that eventually lead to varied climatic events in different areas across the globe. So moving forward, now let us understand the importance of global warming patterns than the warming levels. So that is how important it is to understand these patterns rather than sticking to a particular threshold. Okay. So first one is localized climate impacts. Global average temperatures, these provide only a broad picture, but ultimately they mask the regional variation and the reality. For example, if you see the Arctic warming, it is actually warming at a temperature which is twice as that of the global level. So here, having a global average, this totally masks whatever is happening within a particular region. Example, the Arctic warming, that is the warming of the ice sheets. Next one is tailored adaptation and mitigation strategies. Recognizing the diverse warming patterns, this will allow for more activities or effective implementations of policies at the local as well as regional climatic strategies. For instance, areas that are more prone to drought or flooding can implement specific targeted measures. Okay. Next one is varied responses to El Nino. We know that the effect of El Nino varies dramatically across the globe. And so, understanding these minute nuances is crucial for predicting and mitigating the climate-related disasters in the particular affected regions. Moving forward, enhanced climate modeling. So, detailed knowledge of warming patterns, this will contribute to more accurate climatic models, and this will help policymakers in order to devise essential plans for more effective climate actions. The next one is ecosystem and biodiversity protection. The differential rates of warming actually affects the species and habitats unevenly, necessitating the targeted conservation efforts. For example, coral reefs are highly sensitive to temperature changes with only 1 to 2 degrees Celsius increase, causing coral bleaching and potential ecosystem collapse over a period of time. The next article that we'll be discussing about is over 3 lakh ASHAs apply for center's health cover. So this particular article discusses about the center's announcement to extend the benefits of the centrally sponsored scheme, that is the Ayushman Bharat scheme, to both the ASHA workers as well as the Anganwadi workers. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about who are ASHA workers, what is the eligibility criteria for you to become an ASHA worker, how are they different from the Anganwadi workers, as well as the provisions and benefits of the Ayushman Bharat scheme. So here I told you we'll be discussing about the Ayushman Bharat scheme, and then we'll be looking at the universal health coverage, and we can map it to economic and social development under prelims, as well as under mains it falls under GS paper 2, issues relating to health. Now, looking into the previous year questions, we've had a number of questions in the year 2012 as well as 2018 with respect to that of health, and health becomes an extremely important topic for your UPSC CSE examination. So, if we see, we have a question in mains in 2018 where they had actually spoken about local community level healthcare intervention is a prerequisite to achieve health for all in India. And moving on, we have a prelims question in 2012 where they asked about a national rural health mission and which of the following are the jobs of ASHA workers. So here you need to know who are the ASHAs, what is their eligibility, and so on. Okay. So, moving on to the news, the central government has extended the benefits of the Ayushman Bharat scheme to the ASHA workers as well as the Anganwadi workers. So, who are these ASHA workers? ASHA actually stands for Accredited Social Health Activist Workers. Okay, so this particular extension of benefits of the Ayushman Bharat scheme will provide them with health coverage of up to rupees 5 lakh per family annually. This is very important for secondary as well as tertiary medical care. So moving forward, now let us understand what is this Ayushman Bharat scheme. So the schemes, the provisions, the beneficiaries or the target groups that are covered there are all very important for your examination. Okay. So looking into this Ayushman Bharat scheme, it is one of the world's largest health insurance scheme and it was launched in the year 2018, recommended by the National Health Policy of 2017, and it is under the aegis of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Okay, now looking into the aim is that it aims to achieve universal health coverage, and the funding is that it is a centrally sponsored scheme. And let us look into the coverage. It has covered up to 10 crore families, which is nothing but approximately 50 crore beneficiaries, and this is as per the data of SECC, that is socio-economic caste census. Moving forward, the implementing agency is the National Health Authority. And now let us look into the components of the scheme. The scheme actually entails three basic components. One is health and wellness centers. These centers are established in order to deliver primary health care near your homes. The next one is Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. As the name suggests, it actually provides a health cover of rupees 5 lakhs per family annually for secondary as well as tertiary care. So remember here, secondary and tertiary, primary is actually not there. The next one is Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission that was actually launched in 2021 in order to provide unique digital health IDs. So moving forward, let us look into who are the ASHAs. So, ASHAs were actually a part of the National Rural Health Mission and they were initially restricted, or they actually had to function only in the rural areas in 2005 and 2006. But in 2013, their work actually got extended to urban areas as well with the National Urban Health Mission in 2013. Now, let us look at the selection process. Okay, the criteria is any woman resident of the village, whether married or widowed or divorced, from the age of 25 to 45 years can actually become an ASHA worker. And the process of selection is nothing but it is a systematic process which involves various stakeholders like various community groups, various self-help groups, the block nodal officer, the digital nodal officer, the village health committee as well as the Gram Sabha. Moving forward, now let us look into the role of ASHAs. So first one is community awareness. Okay, so the ASHAs are responsible to create community awareness, such as they actually tell you about what is the sanitation that has to be adopted and what are the hygiene practices that one actually have to adopt. They tell you about the nutrition, that since they actually play a link between the people as well as the public healthcare system. So next one is provide counseling. They actually provide counseling to women regarding safe institutional delivery, the benefits of breastfeeding, what are the benefits and importance of immunization, and they keep the women informed and prepared for childbirth or child delivery. And finally, they are actually responsible for mobilization. That is, they mobilize the entire community to the health and health related services which are available at the health centers, okay, the public health centers. So moving forward, let us actually look at the difference between the ASHA as well as the Anganwadi workers. So if you look at this tabular column, the origin of the program, here they were part of the National Rural Health Mission in 2005. However, they were extended to the National Urban Health Mission also from 2013. And however, if you see, the Anganwadi workers are different from them. Why? Because they are a part of Integrated Child Development Scheme, that is the ICDS scheme, which started in 1970s, to be particular 1975. And what is their primary role? They actually, that is the ASHA workers, primarily act as a link between the community and the public health system, thereby promoting the health awareness and facilitating access to healthcare services. Whereas if you see the Anganwadi workers, they focus on the nutritional development of the children under 6 and pregnant women, lactating mothers, thereby playing a crucial role in early childhood development. So this is how you need to prepare for your examination. While you are preparing for a scheme, you need to know who are the beneficiaries under the scheme, what are the provisions, and what are ASHA workers, and how are they different from the other workers like the Anganwadi workers. The next article that we'll be discussing about is Trump says want NATO allies pay up or will tell Russia to do whatever it wants. So this particular article discusses about Donald Trump, the former president of the United States. He has actually stated that all the allies of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that is this particular grouping, have to keep up to their defense spending targets as a part of the security or the collective security principle of this particular organization. Okay, so this is very simple to understand. NATO is an organization. It has the collective security as one of its clause or one of its provisions. So as per this provision, what you have to do is keep up to your defense spending targets. That is all the allies of this organization. So this is what Trump had actually said. So here, NATO as an organization is very, very important, as all the international and global groupings are very important. Its agenda, commitments, what are India's commitments, the outcomes are all important. So how do you map it to the UPSC syllabus? It is important under bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements involving India or that affecting India's interests under GS paper 2 international relations. So moving forward, let us actually see the previous year question. In 2021, there was a question on AUKUS partnership. And in 2016, if we see, there is a question on Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW. So again, all organizations, mandate, provisions with what intentions it was actually brought into existence all become important for your examination. Okay. So here, now let us discuss. The former president of the United States, Donald Trump, had said that US might not defend the NATO allies who do not meet the defense spending targets as it undermines the collective security principle. So we will be looking into what is the collective security principle. It is mentioned under Article 5 of this particular, treaty that is called as the Washington Treaty or the North Atlantic Treaty. We'll actually see that. Okay. Now let us actually understand about the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that is the NATO. So looking at this particular map, you can actually understand these are the member countries of this particular organization. Initially, it was formed by 12 countries. However, the current membership extends to about 31 countries. So let us see. The establishment of NATO was actually done in 1949 through the Washington Treaty, which is also called as the North Atlantic Treaty. And why did this come into existence was to counter the expansion of the Soviet Union post-World War II. And what is the purpose of this particular organization of the grouping was in order to guarantee freedom and security of its members through political as well as military means. Who are the founding members? As I told you, initially it was formed by 12 members, namely the US, UK, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, as well as Portugal. And current members actually extend to 31 member countries as of now. India is not a member of NATO. It is very important to understand. And what is the relation we share with this grouping is also very important. And the recent additions include North Macedonia in 2020 and Finland lately joined in 2023. So moving forward, let us actually understand about the membership to this particular grouping, that is NATO. Okay. So NATO actually has an open door policy according to Article 10 of the Washington Treaty, where
any European country that can enhance and secure the North Atlantic region can actually join this particular grouping. And the minimum requirements for acquiring the NATO membership, according to Article 10, it actually prescribes 5 criteria. What are the 5 criteria? The new members must uphold democracy, including tolerating diversity among different nations. Next one is new members must be making progress towards a market economy. The third principle was the military forces must be under firm control, firm civilian control. The next one is they must be good as well as peaceful and amicable neighbors and respect sovereignty outside their borders as well as inside. The next one is they must be working towards compatibility with the NATO forces. Okay. So, what is this unanimous approval after the minimum requirements is that it requires the approval of all the 31 existing members. That is, in order to include a new member into the institution, there has to be the approval of 31 existing member countries. So, moving forward, what are your benefits of gaining NATO membership? The first one, as we discussed, is collective defense through Article 5. There is actually something called as Article 5 of collective defense of the Washington Treaty. This was invoked after the 9/11 attack, that is the attack against the United States by, the terrorist organization. Here, this actually talks about collective defense means that an attack against one ally is considered as an attack against all the other allies. Okay, so this is actually a benefit. If your country is attacked, that means it is equivalent to the attack on all your ally countries of the NATO if you belong to this particular grouping. The second benefit is you can actually have military as well as security enhancements. That is, if you are part of NATO, you have access to advanced military resources as well as shared intelligence. Moving forward, there is political influence, increased global standing, and influence in international security matters. Now, let us look into what is the kind of relations India actually shares with this particular grouping. Though not a member, India always maintains a strategic partnership with not only NATO, with many of the organizations. That I always tell you while discussing international relations, it's important to actually discuss how India is related to that particular grouping or how India actually reacts to any kind of conflict, whether it is West Asian crisis or whether, it is Israel-Palestine conflict or Russia-Ukraine war. Its policy of non-alignment as well as de-hyphenation is what you have to mention in your answers. Okay. So here, though not a member, India maintains a strategic partnership with the NATO members which focuses on counter-terrorism, maritime security and cyber security. As I also told you, you must always bring in an element of non-aligned movement. Okay, so India's historical stance of non-alignment and strategic autonomy actually shapes its engagement with military alliances like NATO. It is neither inclined towards this particular organization nor it's averse or against the principles of this particular organization. The next article that we'll be discussing about is BJP releases first list of RS nominees. Sitting ministers failed to make the cut. So this particular article is political in nature. But what is the takeaway from this article is that we need to understand the method of election of the members of the Rajya Sabha, which is the upper house of the parliament. Okay. So here we'll be discussing election to the Rajya Sabha in the Indian Parliament, and it becomes relevant under Parliament as well as state legislatures under GS paper 2 mains. So, since Parliament is an important topic of discussion and a favorite topic for the UPSC, you have a question every year from any of the parts of the Parliament, whether the different houses of the Parliament or the process of passage of bills and the budget, all these are actually, that is parliamentary procedures, the committees all become important. Okay. So, in 2020, we had a question on Rajya Sabha in the mains as well as in the prelims, you had a question in 2015. So, understanding that in depth is very, very important. So, what is the news about is political parties at the center have started releasing the list of candidates for the forthcoming Rajya Sabha elections. Now, let us get to understand what is Rajya Sabha. A few minutes ago, we had actually discussed the difference between Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha on different parameters. And now, let us mainly focus on the process of election that actually takes place by means of single transferable vote for electing a member as a member of the Rajya Sabha. Okay, let us actually see. The Rajya
Rajya Sabha is also called as the Council of States or the upper house of the Indian Parliament, and it serves as a permanent body, that is, it does not undergo any kind of premature dissolution, and it represents the states and the union territories. It is inspired by the British parliamentary system and it corresponds to the House of Lords in the UK. So, this particular thing, that is, what particular provision has been borrowed from which part of the constitution from where, is very, very important. So, we need to cram that up, and that comes in the examination, or it is important to quote that in your exam. Okay, that is when you're writing the answer. So now let us understand what is the composition of Rajya Sabha. Since all this was discussed in detail few minutes back, I will just run you through the statics or the data that you must know. So composition of Rajya Sabha is total seats is 250, where you have 238 representatives of the states and the UTs elected indirectly by the already elected representatives. That is, your MLAs, member of legislative assemblies, who are elected by the people, they are involved in the process of electing the members of the Rajya Sabha, and 12 nominated by the president, and these 12 people have actually achieved any kind of laurels in art, science, literature as well as social service. And here at present you see there are 245 members, of which 229 represent the states, 4 represent the UTs, and there are 12 nominated by the president from the field of art, science, literature as well as social service. And how are the allocation of the Rajya Sabha seats are done? It depends on the population of a particular state or the UT. And the Rajya Sabha, as we know, is a permanent house. It does not undergo any kind of premature dissolution when it fails to prove the majority like the Lok Sabha, and so it never gets dissolved completely. However, every 2 years, one third of the members retire after completing their respective 6-year term. And how are the members of the Rajya Sabha elected is what is important for this particular discussion. Okay. So now let us understand the election process of the Rajya Sabha. So how are the Rajya Sabha members elected? It is by a process of single transferable vote via open ballot in order to prevent the system of cross voting. And each voter ranks the list of candidates in order of preference on the ballot paper. That is, for example, if there are 3 seats which are vacant for filling of the Rajya Sabha member, and if there are 5 candidates, and if I am the MLA who has to elect them to power, what do? I take my ballot paper and I list them down, that A is my first preference, B is my second preference, D is my third preference. So I list them down and I showcase that paper to an authorizing agent of belonging to my political party. Okay, here I definitely should not cast my nota over there, because according to the Supreme Court there has to be no nota, or it disallowed nota in the RS elections. So after that, what happens? After the counting and everything is done, candidate who meets the quota of votes, they win the Rajya Sabha vacant seat. And what is this quota of votes? How it is decided? It is decided by this particular formula, that is total number of valid votes divided by the number of seats plus 1 plus 1. Here I'll actually give you an illustration in terms of real numbers for your better understanding. Now you will understand the remaining votes apart from this particular quota goes to the next candidate, but with a lesser value, since it's not a first preference vote. So now let us actually understand this process of single transferable vote with an illustration. I'll give you numbers so that your understanding becomes easy. Okay, for example, a state has been allocated 3 Rajya Sabha seats. Okay, and there are 300 MLAs who can vote you to power to become a member of the Rajya Sabha, and there are 5 candidates A, B, C, D and E. Okay. Now, how do you determine this quota? Determining quota actually happens by a simple formula, that is total number of valid votes divided by number of seats plus 1 plus 1. So what will be the total number of valid votes? It will be 300, right? Divided by number of seats is what? 3 seats which have been allotted to a particular state plus 1 plus 1. So if you solve this, then the number will become 76. So any candidate, that is A, B, C, D or E, who actually gets this quota of 76 will qualify to become the member of the Rajya Sabha. Now what happens is, now we know what is this quota. So this is the first thing. The second thing is the voting by the MLA, voting process. Okay, so now I am the MLA. MLA actually vote in the form of preferences in the ballots. Okay, so after that, counting the first preference votes actually takes place. Okay, so if my first preference is A followed by B or D, now what happens? The counting is also done based on the first preferences of all the 300 MLAs. Do you understand? So what happened? For example, by counting the preferences, we come to know out of 300, A has got 90 preferences, B has actually got 80 votes. So A has got 90 votes, B has got 80 votes, C has got 60, followed by D 40 and E 30 votes. Do you understand? So here, since A and B actually have crossed the quota, that is, they have achieved more than what this quota is there, then what happens? A and B actually stand elected as the members of the Rajya Sabha. Now what happens? You need to understand A has 90. So the remaining, that is the surplus votes, have to be transferred, right? So how does it happen? A has 90, and when you subtract the 76, you actually have 14 votes. So this is actually transferred to the next preferred candidate on each ballot. Okay, and now the process of elimination actually takes place. Elimination is what? Even after you transfer this surplus votes to any particular member, and if they do not reach the quota, that person has the least number of votes will be eliminated. So here E will actually be eliminated here. So E will eliminate, but what happens is most of the E's votes actually, if it has, for example, C as the second preference, then that will be transferred to C. Thereby now C will actually reach above the quota and it will get elected. So here totally what happens? A, B and C will actually stand as the number of members elected to be the members of Rajya Sabha. So this is what is the process of single transferable vote, and this is how it actually takes place. Okay. The first question reads, India is a member of which of the following regional groupings? NATO, Quad, AUKUS as well as CSTO. India is a member of only the Quad grouping. Okay. So here NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Here the CSTO actually stands for Collective Security Treaty Organization. AUKUS is a trilateral security pact between Australia, UK and the US. And finally, you have the Quad, which is nothing but a strategic dialogue between the United States, India, Japan, as well as Australia. So here, India is only a part of Quad. So going by the options, the answer will be A. Moving on, the second question is, who among the following is not a member of NATO? Switzerland, Greece, Turkey and Canada. Switzerland is not a member of the NATO. So these are very static parts, you need to know it. So the answer is A. Next one, consider the following statements regarding ASHAs. They were launched as a part of National Urban Health Mission. No, as a part of National Rural Health Mission in 2005. They are primarily involved in providing tertiary medical care. No, secondary as well as tertiary. Next one, they act as a link between the community and the public health system, promoting health awareness and facilitating access to healthcare services. This is correct. So going by the options, the answer will be B, that is 3 only. Moving forward, the term climate proxies, sometimes seen in news, is related to which of the following? So these are techniques to measure historical climate conditions using natural recorders such as the tree rings and the ice cores. Yes, this is correct. So since the first option is correct, the answer is A. Next one, in India, the proportional representation with single transferable vote system is used in which of the following elections? Election of the President of India, yes. Vice President of India, yes. Election of Rajya Sabha, yes. As well as election to the legislative councils. This is also correct. So select the correct answer using the codes given below, going by the options, all of the above. That is, answer is option D. Now moving on to the mains practice question, examine the recent trend of declining number of sitting days in the Indian Parliament and discuss the implications on the quality of legislative and democratic accountability. Suggest the measures in order to enhance the Parliament's productivity. So there is a 15 marker and you have to write the answer in 250 words. Now the approach to this particular question has been divided into introduction, body as well as conclusion. In the introduction, we will mention about the key findings of the recent study study by the PRS Legislative Research, that is, it has declined by 59.3%. And in the body, we'll talk about the legislative quality, analyze the shorter sessions, lead to the rushed legislation and limited debates, and we can discuss the impact on the thoroughness of the legislative process. Next one is democratic accountability. Here we will actually explore the reduced opportunities for the opposition to scrutinize and public transparency, and this will reflect on the increased use of ordinances and its impact on checks and balances. Next one is we need to enhance the productivity. We need to propose instituting a mandatory minimum number of sitting days, advocate for strengthening parliamentary committees and pre-legislative consultations with respect to the public, as well as the debates and discussions from the opposition as well. And we must suggest the measures like penalizing the disruptions and enhancing the member training. And you have to conclude the answer by highlighting the importance of reviving the parliamentary efficacy and efficiency in order to uphold the principles of parliamentary democracy. So we are done with the daily news analysis for the day. For further updates and regular updates, please like, share, and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel. Thank you.